The assertive claim by Felice, according to which Stalin since 1933 had shown indifference with respect to the tragedy of the Jews, or an anti-Semitism in its most explicit form, clearly lacks any basis. Will the timeline proposed by an American historian previously cited, who identifies that madness and Stalin following the Second World War, prove to be more convincing? We've already encountered the irritated reaction by the American Jewish community to the accusation of anti-Semitism directed at Stalin by Trotsky in 1937. 8 years later and the situation still hadn't changed. Rather, there are prominent social circles and figures in the American military hierarchy who are a cause for concern. Take the example of General George S. Patton. He dreams of an immediate war against the Soviets. We will have to fight them sooner or later. Why not now while our army is still intact and while we can push all those damn Russians all the way back to Moscow in 3 months? We could easily do it with the German troops that we have. Just arm them and take them with us. They hate those bastards. 698 Unfortunately, according to the American general, it's the Jews who oppose this project. Full of resentment toward Germany, they harbor sympathy for the USSR. The evident Semitic influence in the press aims to promote communism. There clearly emerges a line of continuity with the Nazi understanding of communism as a subversive Judeo-Bolshevik conspiracy. The enemies continue to be the communists, the Soviets and the Jews, the latter being lower than animals. After particularly imprudent statements, General Patton was relieved of his command, but he was not alone in that line of thinking. 699 While being accused of having links to Judaism, the Soviet Union does, in fact, follow a largely sympathetic policy in relation to the people that survived a horrible persecution. In reconstructing this chapter in history, I will mostly use one book, despite it being dedicated in denouncing the anti-Semitism of the socialist camp led by the USSR. We start in Hungary. The structure of the communist regime that was established following the arrival of the Red Army is made up of cadres who had lived for some time in Moscow, nearly all of them Jews. The fact of the matter is that Stalin had no other choice, as he only trusted them. When the first elections to the Central Committee are held, a third of its members are Jews. The highest leadership also proves to be from the same ethnic background, starting with Rákosi, the first Jewish king of Hungary. The author of that flattering description is one of Stalin's closest collaborators, namely Beria. 700 The situation in the rest of the socialist camp is not very different. We will limit ourselves to another pair of examples. In Poland, the presence of Jews in the communist ranks, especially at the highest levels of the regime, was significant. And that's not all. The branch of communist authority in which the appearance of Jews was greatest is noteworthy, the security apparatus. 701 In Czechoslovakia, it's not only Jews, but Zionists themselves who are favored by the post-war government and are present within it. 702 A similar consideration could be made for Germany. In the Russian zone, Jews usually receive the best positions. Moreover, the man who leads cultural activity in the Soviet zone is a brilliant art historian, Colonel Alexander Dimsitz, also of Jewish origin. And the presence of the Jewish German intelligentsia in Gotha is easily noticed in the cultural rebirth that begins to emerge amid the grief and ruins. 703 The situation certainly doesn't change with the foundation of the German Democratic Republic, in Communist Germany. Officially born on October 7 of 1949, Jews initially enjoy favorable treatment, if not privileged treatment. As victims of persecution they have a right to special pensions for the elderly and for the sick or disabled, and the Constitution guarantees them religious freedom. Peter Kirchner explains, pensions for Jews were much higher than for others. It had varied between 1,400 and 1,700 marks, when the average wasn't more than 350 inches. Jews therefore felt at ease with the policies of the new communist Germany in relation to them, especially because they were widely represented in its institutions. In the elections of 1950, 15 Jews were elected to parliament in the lists of nearly all the parties, not counting the Communist Party. In addition, the Minister of Propaganda and Information, Gerhard Eisler, the Director of State Information Radio, Leo Bauer, the Director of the communist paper Neues Deutschland, Rudolf Herrnstadt, and the person in charge of a branch of the Health Ministry, Leo Mandel, were all Jews. 704 It's also for that reason that the Soviet Union enjoys great sympathy among Zionists all over the world. They go as far as admiring everything that is Russian. It's Arendt who observes this, and who in 1948 expresses her disappointment toward the pro-Soviet and anti-Western orientation of the Zionist movement, inclined to condemn Great Britain as anti-Semitic, and the United States as imperialist. 705 The attitude that's being condemned here is very understandable. In Nuremberg, it was primarily the Soviet representatives in the prosecution who called attention to the horrors of the Judaicide and called attention to it with rhetorical emphasis, formulating a solidly intentionalist theory. The fascist conspirators planned the extermination of the Jewish people throughout the world, to the last man, and they put it in action during the entire period of their plot, from 1933 onward. One of the most dramatic moments of the trial was the testimony, again promoted by the Soviet representatives in the prosecution, by 4 Jews, among whom one mother expressed herself as follows: "In the name of all the mothers of Europe who became mothers in the concentration camps, I ask German mothers, where are our children now?" 706 Overall, these are the years in which the USSR strongly supports Zionism and the creation of Israel. Stalin plays a frontline role, and perhaps even a decisive role. Without him the emergence of the Jewish state in Palestine would have been difficult. A Russian historian goes as far as saying, using documents recently made public in his country. 707 In any case, as another author observes, the speech in May of 1948 before the UN by the Soviet Minister of Foreign Affairs, Andrei A. Gromyko, appears like something out of a Zionist propaganda manual. The foundation of Israel is necessary for the fact that in the territories occupied by the Nazis, the Jews suffered an almost complete annihilation, while no state of Western Europe was able to provide adequate assistance to the Jewish people in defense of their rights and their very existence. 708 Moreover, in supporting Zionism, Stalin at times clashes with Great Britain. The latter makes use of the military forces of the former Republic of Salo and the 10th Assault Vehicle Flotilla to bomb a ship that, after the end of military operations, transported weapons from Yugoslavia to the Jews in Palestine. 709 At this time, it's the government in London that is considered to be the principal enemy of the Jews. 710 The suspicion and accusation of anti-Semitism certainly weren't thrust upon the Soviet Union, committed to militarily and diplomatically supporting the foundation of the State of Israel, but upon Great Britain, which in its effort to obstruct those plans, doesn't hesitate to use political and military circles that, even within the Republic of Salo, had played an important role in the final solution. Yet a more general consideration can be made. After the end of the war, Stalin pursues a fundamentally pro-Jewish policy on Palestine. Political and geopolitical calculations had, of course, contributed to pushing it. The desire to undermine British positions in the Middle East, an objective also pursued by Truman, whose support to the foundation of the State of Israel is no coincidence, and to gain the support or at least the sympathy of the American and European Jewish communities during the Cold War, with the added hope that the new state, founded with the decisive contribution of immigration coming from Eastern Europe and often of a left political orientation, would take a pro-Soviet attitude. It's true that the military aid in 1945 offered to the Zionist movement through Yugoslavia was not an isolated gesture. 3 years later, this time using the collaboration of Czechoslovakia, the Soviet Union supplied new arms to Israel, and in violating the UN Security Council resolution of March 29 of 1948, it even organizes the influx of young Jews from Eastern Europe who reinforce the army of the Jewish state in the war with the neighboring Arab countries. Thanks as well to Moscow, in action as what was defined as the Prague-Jerusalem axis. Indeed, the weapons wielded by the soldiers of the newly born State of Israel to fight their war of independence are made in Czechoslovakia. Precisely when other governments refused to sell weapons to the Jewish state, Czechoslovakia decided to continue selling them openly, even at preferential rates. Thus in Czechoslovakian territory the Israeli Air Force was founded, the training of paratroopers was organized there. 711 A true air bridge is established, which supplies the Zionist army with weapons, instructors and even volunteers. 712 In October of the same year, the Israeli Minister of Foreign Affairs, in Paris at the time, happily tells Prime Minister Ben-Gurion that the Soviet delegates at the UN conference on the question of Palestine had behaved like Israel's lawyers. 713 At the very least, it can be said that Stalin's Soviet Union contributed in a decisive way to the foundation and consolidation of the Jewish state. There are also some interesting aspects with respect to relations with Judaism and Jewish culture in general. In the middle of what was called the campaign against anti-Semitism, a residential suburb of Moscow took on the name New Jerusalem. There Ilya Ehrenberg has his dacha. Ehrenberg is a Jewish intellectual who plays a grand and leading cultural and political role in the Soviet Union at that time, and who, not by chance, is offered the Stalin Prize, a recognition achieved by other Jewish writers as well, and by some Jewish musicians of international fame. 714 So, what sense is there to speak of anti-Semitism with regard to Stalin? The support given by him to the foundation and consolidation of the Jewish state is at the same time a contribution given to the Nakba, that is the national catastrophe for the Palestinian people, who for decades continue to languish in refugee camps and in the territories subjected to a ruthless military occupation and a rampant process of colonization. If, for the purposes of being absurd, Stalin must be accused of anti-Semitism, he should be accused of anti-Semitism toward Arabs. With regard to that, it's necessary to specify that the Soviet Union's preference was for a multinational and independent state that respected the interests of both Jews as well as Arabs. 715